Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the March meeting of Leeds Council Executive Board. I'd like to welcome students from Leeds Beckett University who've come to see us, the journalism students. We'll all make sure we speak very slowly so you can keep up with your shorthand for our deliberations this afternoon. So welcome everybody, and I'll move on to the agenda. So do we have any appeals against refusal of inspection of documents, please?
Thanks, Chair. To confirm, there's been no appeals received for today's meeting.
Item, slipped on my screen. Item 2, any items for exclusion of the press and public?
No, Chair. To confirm, there's no information on the agenda which is designated as being exempt from publication.
Thank you. Any late items, please?
No formal late items of business, Chair. However, board members have received an addendum to agenda item 6, which is the energy costs and purchasing strategy, which provides members with an updated position regarding energy purchasing.
Thank you. Are there any declarations of interest from the board? I don't see any. Move on to item 5 and the minutes of the February meeting. Are we all happy with those? I take it we all are. That's great. We'll move on to the first item, which is the one that we have the addendum for, which is energy costs and purchasing strategy. Please, Councillor Hayden.
Thank you very much, Leader. So I think we're all very aware of the volatile and fluctuating market when it comes to energy prices at the moment. And this paper seeks approval for amendments to the Council's existing energy purchasing strategy in order that we manage the risks that are in the market most effectively. I'm really proud of the way that the Council's approach to energy as part of our decarbonisation, and also tackling fuel poverty as well through the district heating network, which means that this building that we're sitting in at the moment is 65% cheaper because it is heated by the district heating network from our incinerator, which is on the edge of our ward, myself and Councillor Cooper's ward. So it's also our electric, the decision taken a few years ago for our fleet of vans and cars to go electric, which means that petrol prices affect us much less as a council, and strategies such as LED lighting for our street lights, which means that they it's reducing costs, which means that we are not as affected by the price rises as we otherwise would have been. That's not to say that we aren't that we are complacent. We are very, very concerned and wish to manage the risks and the rising prices and the fluctuating prices as effectively as possible. So I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Councillor Hayden. Councillor Carter, please.
Yes, I'm glad you added the last bit, Councillor Hayden, because I wouldn't like anyone to go away believing that we're in a bubble here and that we won't be drastically affected. And the fact that electricity prices are likely to be going up equally as much as gas will not save us with our fleet of electric vehicles from the impact. Before Councillor Galton mentions it, I would like to know about payback time on LED, because it seems to me the payback time on the conversion to LED has now gone down to virtually zero. It pays for itself almost immediately, and it's a good job we started when we did, and some would say we should have started a bit earlier. But my main point is this. And it's easy to second guess, and you can't second guess. And I wouldn't be, I'm not envious of any council officer who has to deal with the decisions on future purchasing of energy supplies, because it is very, very difficult, and some of the best minds in the country are going to be sorely taxed by the decision on buying forward, where we're buying it from. Could Mr. Evans tell me perhaps what percentage of our gas and electricity supplies we are buying forward and to what time frame. The concern obviously is that with the fluctuating situation outside.
Yeah.
You want to say something, Stuart? Please
No.
carry on. No. With the fluctuating prices outside and the turmoil in the world situation, prices could drop like a stone. Now, they might not, but they might. If we forward bought until October, then we'll be buying at above market price. So what sort of controls have we got? Chief executive, I suppose, really, across the authority to unify and make sure we're not working in silos when it comes to purchasing energy on any sort of basis, never mind forward or backward, but on any sort of basis. And I understand how difficult. I'm not trying, it's not a trick question. I'm not trying to put somebody in the frame for making a disastrous decision, because none of us know what the decisions will be. But I would like an answer on the working in silos situation.
Thank you, Councillor Carter. None of us have that crystal ball, do we? Neil, would you like to come in, please?
Yeah, so Polly's team buys the energy across the piece for the whole of the authority, so there isn't any working silos in that regard. And also, Councillor Carter, if you look on table 3 on the back of the supplementary paper that you've been given today, there is actually a chart there which on the very back page you'll see that. I think I'm looking at Councillor Galton. He's looking at the wrong page. Actually, turn one over, Councillor Galton, on the very back. That shows you what proportion we've bought in advance. So you can see for this summer, we've bought that well in advance before the price hike. So we're actually well in for this summer. But you can see that in the winter, we've only purchased around about 2/3 of our energy in advance. So we are more exposed to the current prices, which is why the paper is indicating a potential 10 million increase because of that third which we have to purchase. And then if you look further forward into 25, there is no purchasing at that in those periods, which is why the paper is bringing forward a strategy which enables us to buy further forward. You're right to say we can't predict. We do try to take the best advice, obviously, from energy specialists, but in the circumstances, what you would try to achieve is a bit of a balance between forward bought and on the day purchasing, so to kind of spread your risk, so that if we are to get it wrong, then at least one element actually cushions the effect of another. I don't know, would Polly, you'd like to add anything more to what I've said, or does that kind of cover it?
I think you've covered it, Neil.
So on the side, I think we purchased it for the whole authority, so there aren't any silos in that respect.
Thank you. Councillor Galton would like to come in, please.
Yeah, it's a question around energy security, Chair. As you know, our group has been a little bit fundamentalist when it comes to looking at anaerobic digestion as an opportunity for generating our own power, and therefore having some control of costs. But we do appreciate that's at quite a small scale compared to the level of energy that the council needs to secure. So I was just wondering, this is a very important paper, and I support it completely in terms of like the council strategy to controlling costs going forward. But what is the longer term plan for the council to generate a greater degree of its own energy? And I'm wondering if there is any incentive at all, because we're looking to the Prime Minister and government to lead on our future energy security. And I know he's gone to Saudi Arabia today, and that's very controversial. And it would be good to know that local authorities are being empowered to power themselves. And I just wonder if there's any lack of incentive, because I saw a domestic producer of energy comment that the cost of the electricity they purchase from their supplier has gone up by a significant percentage, but the fee that that same supplier pays them for their excess energy that they produce through their photovoltaics hasn't gone up at all. And I just wonder if we could have a greater incentive to produce our own energy, that will be really helpful for us.
Thank you, Councillor Gott. I don't know if it was when you were coming in late, but Councillor Hayden was explaining this building's now heated by our own, by energy from our own generation source. So, and obviously the hot air created by the Lib Dem group does add to that as well. So, I remember putting out a leaflet saying so. Councillor Hayden, would you like to come back in, please?
I think the greatest incentive in producing our own is the climate emergency. And I don't think we need any greater incentive to producing our own. And I know Polly and her team are looking at all kinds of ways of utilising whatever we can in order to make our own energy. Energy security and the cost of it is a much needed and added incentive, but we have a climate emergency as well, which drives us in terms of energy production. I'd also like to say that we are very lucky in Leeds that we have one of the best minds in the country looking after our energy, and that is Polly Cook. She frightens me quite a lot, but she is one of the best minds in the country.
Tom, would you like to come in, please?
Yeah, I think they're all really pertinent points that have been raised, and it is a heck of a challenge to make these judgments. And in a year's time, we'll look back and some of it will have been below the line, and some of it will be above the line, and it'll be I think that risk-based approach is the right thing to do. I also think the question about avoiding silos is important. We're not the only ones with silos, of course, and Whitehall, if you think about the impact of this on the city and on people generally, this is a comment about whoever was in government nationally, because this is the way the Whitehall organises itself. There's the Treasury looking at the tax incentive system. You've got DEC, the Energy Department, looking at this issue, particularly about supply. You've got BEIS with the potential, job opportunities and the local developments. And then you've got DLUHC in terms of our parent department and some of the waste issues as well. There's probably actually it's DEFRA waste, Polly, yeah. So there's even 5. I think other councils may well be hit harder than us, because some may not be having this approach of forward buying. Some may not have the whole council approach. So I think we have some common cause here, and I think there is a conversation that's going to be needed with government about just how we deal with these increases, because if you think about the numbers we're talking about, it could be as significant as double figures, well into double figures for us going into the future, and when you add that up for the sector as a whole, it's very significant. So I think we need to have dialogue at a national level, and we've started that with the civil service, and we'll keep, we can keep members updated about how that goes.
Thank you, Tom. Neil, would like to come in, please?
Yeah, just a couple of things, just on Councillor Goll's point about security. There are probably 3 things which we can do. One is actually reducing our reliance on energy, and the investment we make, which Councillor Hayden has already referred to. But as Councillor Carr was indicating, some of the metrics around that will also change. So things which might have been unaffordable a couple of years ago may now be affordable. So we can look at that through capital. But the other 2, there are clearly schemes which we already pursue around energy generation. So many of our buildings are getting solar as part of their refurb, and we are looking at potential schemes around solar farms within district. And then the third area is actually then maybe what we can do to actually invest in renewables nationally. So not necessarily with us, but one of the things which was brought to the executive board as part of the climate change work was our investment in companies from whom we would then buy electricity. So that helps stimulate the market, actually improves renewables within this country, which helps us on the climate change carbon front, but also actually increases resilience and reliability as well. So all those things I think are complementary to one another.
Thank you, Neil. I will draw that to a close and go to the recommendations on page 26. Is everybody on the board happy with those recommendations? Thank you. Those are approved. And we move on to the item in my portfolio, which is the COVID-19 update. I think it's worth reflecting that it's 2 years since we had our first COVID update at executive board, and you know, the 2,044 people who've died as a result of COVID in Leeds, I'm sure, are in our thoughts as we look at this report. We are this report covers a large number of areas. The ones I will particularly pick up is we have drawn down a lot of our COVID responses. So the strategic goal group is no longer meeting, and we are seeing services return to business as usual. I think it's important in saying that to reflect there's still huge pressure on the health and social care sectors, as well as although the restrictions on day-to-day life have been withdrawn, we know there's still huge pressures on health and social care in the city. The report sets out again the update on the response and recovery plan, and we'll be looking at reducing even more the frequency of these reports, but likely to come back in September, October to look at winter planning in health and social care and see what the position is there. So I'll leave it there and see if there's any questions or comments, please.
Could somebody update me, please? Sorry, could someone update me, please, on getting staff back to work, particularly younger members of staff who might not have been with us for a hugely long period of time, back into working in the office where they are with other members of staff and can engage face to face. And I'd like an update on that, please.
Neil, would you like to come in, please?
Yes. So the strategy which we're taking is to now be actively encouraging staff back to the office using sort of patterns which we were had established pre-Omicron. So that is taking place at the moment. But I think we're also recognising that things have changed. We won't be going back to 2019. So we will be using the period between now and the end of May as a period where we consult with staff about what is working for them, what's worked at home, what's worked in the office. But we also look at all the evidence, qualitative evidence, what members' opinions are, what members of the public's opinions are, what the evidence is telling us in terms of productivity, to kind of come up with what we then consider to be the best blend going forward. And we would envisage in most cases that being some form of hybrid solution. And then the intention then is from June onwards to actually implement that model. I think we do actually have to recognise, and I think a number of companies have fallen a bit foul of this, that we do need to take staff with us. There's been a lot of goodwill through this period, and setting short ultimatums when people have actually got into very different arrangements over the last couple of years can be counterproductive. But I think we can do that, and I know that staff who have been back into the office and have been a bit reluctant to do it sometimes, having got into a new pattern, have almost always found the benefit of coming back into the office and actually enjoyed working with staff. And I agree with you, Councillor Carter. One of the things which I think we do have to be mindful of is younger staff and their career development. And clearly we need to make sure that they are getting the exposure and support that they need to develop.
I'm pleased to hear that. I mean, no one expects to go back to how things were precisely pre-COVID. But I'm glad you've picked up the thing about younger members of staff, because it's now nationally recognised that it's done younger people who have not been in the workplace for long, and they've now experienced 2 years of disruption, no good at all to be confined to using the phone or using conference facilities online. I'm more perturbed. I accept entirely that there are a number of office jobs which can be quite adequately done remotely, but there are a number of particularly visits to constituents, a whole range of things that can be undertaken and should be undertaken, and there needs, I think, to be some fairly critical focus given to that, to make sure that the services we provide to our constituents, which involve a visit to a particular establishment, starts to be properly put back together again.
The signal which we've sent consistently for quite some time, really since the start of 2021, is that services should not be compromised by any COVID restrictions. And as we all know, thousands of staff have worked day in, day out on the front line throughout the period. But it's certainly true that if any task needs to be done in person, it should be being done in person. I think where there's a more nuanced issue in a way is sometimes the task can be done at home, but what you're missing is teamwork and development and those sorts of things. And it's actually working out what sort of exposure people need to each other to actually form a good team, which is probably the biggest kind of thing to consider in terms of how much time people need to spend in the office. But so when people need to be doing things effectively in person, they should be doing those things in person now.
Thank you. There's no more questions on the report. I'll turn to the recommendations on page 40 and take it everybody is happy with those. So we'll move on to item 8, please, Councillor Cooper.
Thank you, Leader. And item 8 is month 10 of the financial health monitoring for 2021-22. We are forecasting a balanced budget at the end of the year, although we're still dealing with a number of COVID-related pressures within that year. I think we've discussed the energy prices and that situation, but currently that's not being factored into this financial report. And just to alert exec board members that the council tax and business rates collection is behind what we'd expect it to have been before the pandemic, although we're closely monitoring it, and the HRA is in a balanced position as well. I'll leave it there for questions, Chair.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, sorry.
Councillor Carter, please.
Just on the heating costs, at what stage will you start factoring them in? And can we make sure we have a timely report on what we've already said is a very volatile situation? There must be beginning to be an impact on the council's budget for this coming financial year. There must be some sort of impact. And I think all the executive board needs to know exactly what that impact is when we know it. So some reassurance, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Carter. And again, the purpose of the monthly updates on our budget position is to do just that. Is it Neil or Richard would like to come in, please? Neil, please. Oh,
First, I did have a comment to make.
Richard, please.
I'm just going to say, Chair, is that we're getting towards the end of the financial year anyway. It's mid-March, so to be honest, in the next 4 weeks, we've got a pretty good idea what the implication is for that. And obviously, we've also got, as referenced in the report, we have got a reserve to apply as well. But there's potentially a pressure there, but that will crystallise very soon.
Like the next exec board meeting.
Sorry, on the broad point. So Richard's covered off this year, but for next year, April, we do have some exposure, so we can report that. But actually through the summer, we're actually over provided for actually pre-board because of reductions in energy use, which Councillor Hayden referred to. We've actually got some surplus we can sell back actually into the grid. So we're actually pretty protected until October. And I think that's the point at which we'll have to start reporting what we think the impacts will be. Obviously, a lot of time between now and October to know what the situation will turn out like.
Thank you. Councillor Cooper, please.
Yeah, and absolutely give reassurance that I'm sure we'll keep discussing this at every executive board going forward, not just under the financial health monitoring, but the volatile situation in terms of energy supply and energy prices and how that might impact on us as well. So happy to give that reassurance, Councillor Carter.
Councillor Galton, please.
Thanks, Chair. Can I refer you to page 104? We've got some really useful reporting tools in this report, and I do like this. Although I have to say, it shows the RAG rating and shows the amber and the reds. It would have been nice actually to see the blues as well, because it is good to celebrate success where it is achieved. But it does focus us on those areas where we should have some concern. And I only point to this particular page because I've previously talked about children's services and the need for some service review type changes as opposed to reliance on business as usual budget savings. Because so far we've realised less than half of what was expected in the budget savings, and other departments are also behind on what they're expected to achieve, but they have achieved a greater proportion of what they promised, and it feels like there's a greater degree of certainty that their interventions will succeed. Yet at month 10 we think that we can recoup the half of the savings which haven't been achieved so far. And I just wonder, on what basis is that confidence held?
So is Tim here, or are you going to pick this up?
I can pick that up initially. I mean, I think
yes, please.
That on many of the lines that are there in this budget action plan, the savings have been being made as we've gone on through the year, but we're pulling that together in order to see that change happen. So I'm confident on a lot of those lines that are in this particular plan. We are still in discussion with health partners on contributions around placements, but again, those conversations have been progressing positively. And we're in live discussions with those, so I'm hopeful for some more positive news on that. And we have been looking at consolidating the work that we've been doing with other authorities through the Strengthening Families programme in order to see how much additional income we can bring in, and that's looking positive as well.
Thank you. Debbie, please.
Yeah, can I just add to what Sal said, and like I mentioned when I introduced the report, it's month 10 of the year's reporting, so we've still got 2 months to go, and there is always you know, a period when you're coming up to the end of the year that you need to realise the changes within that forecast and the actual position. So all that work will be ongoing in the next 2 months as well. So we'll, but hopefully we'll get to the position that Sal's outlined.
Great, thank you. I'm going to turn to the recommendations on page 72, which is to note the report, and I take it everybody's happy with those. Thanks, Councillor Cooper. So, Councillor Harlan, we move on to your item, please.
Thank you, Chair. I wonder if Paul, Liz and Alison would like to join us. Thank you, Chair. So this report provides an update and proposes the city's new locality working model. Just to let you know, it has been through Councillor Anderson's scrutiny board, which has had a watching brief on this and been very supportive, I've got to say, of this project since its inception back in 2017. All community committee chairs have been briefed and support the way forward as proposed in the paper. We're very proud of all the work that's been done in our local communities so far, and the appendices to this report are full of excellent information and case studies and what has been achieved. setting up the 33 community care hubs in the early days of COVID, tackling youth and domestic violence and street drinking, delivering an integrated hub and asset-based community development in Clifton and Knowles, so that now we have an engaged, active local community group there, are just a few examples. So I'd like to give my thanks to all the officers and of course our partner organisations that have been involved in this across the past few very difficult years, I've got to say. The most significant change in this report proposes is expanding the number of priority neighbourhoods to the 12 most disadvantaged neighbourhoods in Leeds, all of those within the most deprived 1% nationally, and having a greater focus ward-wide on the 6 wards where these neighbourhoods are. And whilst focused intensive working in a handful of our most deprived neighbourhoods will always be worthwhile, as I'm sure you will agree, we do need to be careful that building one neighbourhood up doesn't result in simply displacing the deprivation to another nearby neighbourhood. So working across the whole wards of our most deprived neighbourhoods will help us tackle this. There's also an update in the report to the locality working governance, with the Neighbourhood Improvement Board taking strategic accountability and a new citywide local working development group, focusing on operational delivery. And I'd like to restate our commitment to work with members across the council to deliver what is best for their own neighbourhoods through community committees. And I'm glad that the report includes a recommendation on this. Also, as a former scrutiny board chair, I believe that working with scrutiny is another excellent way to engage members and improve our work. And this is also reflected in the report. I look forward to working with any of the other scrutiny boards where appropriate, as I think they can and do add real value. And I'll leave it there. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Harland. Are there any questions or comments on this report, please? Councillor Carter, please.
Just a question really on the two things. The finance, I mean, I welcome the report and I've been briefed by the scrutiny chair, as you would imagine. But there's no mention in here of measurements of success and how we are going to actually keep an eye on where there is success in the expanded number of the wards with the highest area of deprivation. And neither is there any mention of cost anywhere. And so I suppose from an area committee, community committee point of view, you think, well, if we aren't going to have one of these 12 areas, we're going to have some yet more money taken off us whilst they top something else up, bearing in mind that some community committees don't get any preferential treatment, not necessarily that they should have, but they don't, and other areas do. And I'm not opposed to expanding the number of areas to 12, but I would like to know where the money's coming from.
Thank you. Councillor Harland, please.
Well, I think we all agree that as an authority, we believe that money should be spent in the areas that it needs spending in. And some of these benefits of this are immeasurable. And I think, as I said earlier, I think some of the work that's in the appendices here speak volumes for where we've come from since 2017. And a lot of the data that we're using, of course, is 2015, 2019 and not up-to-date data. And also, I think if there's a perception out there now in some of these neighbourhoods that there has been a real improvement and they feel more confident that they've got a voice within the communities. And I think COVID-19's helped with that. But as far as the finances go, I'll hand to my officers to answer that question.
Paul, you're going to come in, please.
Yeah, I think so. It's Paul Money, Chief Officer for the Safer Stronger Communities team. I think this is as much about evolving a way of working as it is anything else, and it's about working as collegiately as we can in particular areas. So in terms of that, it's really about developing that that way of working on the key issues in particular neighbourhoods that we've talked about. In terms of the evaluation, of the work that's been done. There was some evaluation done subject of a previous exec board report around the pilot. But we've recognised and been working with Councillor Harland and indeed others, including scrutiny, about developing that approach to the evaluation of this approach. One of the significant developments in this revised way of working, or this evolving way of working, is the development of the local area plans, local area development plans. And it's through work on those plans that we intend to identify what the key issues are that we need to do in particular neighbourhoods to essentially lift them out of that bottom 1%. And so I think we'll be able to not just evolve the way that we're working, but also evolve the way that we're evaluating the critical success measures that are associated with this work.
Thank you. Councillor Galton, please.
Thanks, Chair. I've had considerable time with the officers discussing this because as you know, the Liberal Democrat group are very keen on internal devolution within the council so that more decision making is taken in communities. And this paper's title sounded quite exciting. But once you get into the content, you realise what the limited focus is. And I think this is part of my frustration. So the term locality working should be a general terminology which talks about how local areas in the city are being empowered and enabled to build capacity in their neighbourhoods. But what it's actually used for in the council is to talk about specific, focused partnership interventions in our most deprived neighbourhoods. And this is a really good paper talking about what happens in those really deprived neighbourhoods. And there's a lot to commend it. But I think the key term that Paul Money just used was critical success. And as Councillor Carter mentioned earlier, there doesn't seem to be a critique of what has worked alongside what hasn't, so that we can better invest in those areas where we have got some results. Because a lot of these neighbourhoods that were in the bottom 1% have actually gone backwards in terms of their national league table position, despite having quite a bit of investment. And it'd be really good to know that what we're doing is the right stuff that works. And the other bit that frustrates me is there is 9/10 of this paper is about that. And then there's 1/10 to describe the 90% of the rest of the city and how they are meant to deliver their locality working without having one of these deprived neighbourhoods within their jurisdiction. And there's just nothing in there. There's no scope or ambition for the rest of the city outside of these deprived neighbourhoods. And it talks about local area plans, and Paul Moyes has mentioned it there, but there's no appendix here which shows what one of these plans might look like or what is expected of the general area committees to deliver. And it just feels a little unfinished. And I just wonder if there's a sister paper that needs to follow this so that the rest of the city can be enabled to deliver what it can in their own neighbourhoods at a lesser level of intervention and a lesser level of resource. Sure. But still, we all need to be motoring at the same time, don't we?
You, Councillor Harlan, if you can unpick a more centralised approach to locality working, please.
The role of community committees, not area committees, Councillor Galton, as you've referred to earlier. We are looking at the whole community committee function, and especially the role of community committee champions within that. And with these local area plans, we do want that to be developed in every community committee, not just in those deprived, so that these community champions are prioritising and driving forward what those priorities are in the community committees. We know that one size does not fit all, so there's no point in us having a blanket, this is what you'll do. But I assure you that it is on my radar to make community committees have a better, not more listened to, but a better heard voice within the city, across the city. And that is a work in progress, and we will bring that forward.
Councillor Cooper, please.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I just wanted to comment as this was an area that I was responsible for a number of years, and I'm really pleased to see that this work is now expanding to 12 areas. Because without doubt, the success that we've had within the 6 priority neighbourhoods has been immense, and we have had various papers at executive board over time that have demonstrated and shown that various success that we've had in those areas around tackling inequality and those disadvantaged communities. I think that you said yourself, Councillor Galton, that about locality work, that it's about bringing together partnerships in a locality to look at the issues within that locality and to deal with them on an individual level according to that area, and that's what's been the success of this work, and all credit to the teams that work on the priority neighbourhoods and tackling inequality in the city, because from where we came from a number of years ago to where we are now is a completely different world away from how we deal with things and take them forward. And I do think actually that there is some centralised function to it through the Neighbourhood Improvement Board that Councillor Harland chairs, bringing about every single directorate and service, agency and partner in the city to talk about intensely about those areas that need specific focus and help. And I do think that there is a lot of learning that we've taken forward and shared with other areas. So, for instance, the area I represent is not a priority neighbourhood, but actually we've taken some learning from the work that's happened there and carried that type of work out with not many resources and not much else to help us, but actually the ideas that have worked we've transferred to other areas as well, and that's been one of the other successes of this approach that we've used in the city. I'll just leave it there, Chair, but I just wanted to say thank you for the team of what they've done, how they've expanded it, and to Councillor Harland for taking this work forward that is so much needed in the city, especially when you think about the situation that people are in at the minute with the concern about how they're going to afford to, how they're going to eat, how they're going to heat the houses that they live in.
Thank you, Councillor Cooper. Tom, would you like to come in, please?
I just wanted to add one point about just to commend the paper as well and the work and what's been said in terms of updating this. I think it's this is one of the most challenging things for us in terms of the city has a very big geography, and if we tried to do everything from here in the Civic Hall, it just won't work. So I think the default mode increasingly for the council in service provision is to try and recognise that difference. But there are other partners in the city as well, and I just wanted to flag up the importance of the work with skill clusters and the new local care partnerships on the health side, where that's another area where the influence that we can have there and the impact we could have on some of these issues is potentially as significant or as big a problem if we don't get it right in those areas. So we have a bit of common cause on that stuff across all parties to get that right and to get that influence right. So I just wanted to flag that as an ongoing important one as well, which certainly isn't there yet, but there are examples of really good practice.
Thank you, Tom. I'm going to turn now to the recommendations on page 114. And I take it everybody's happy with those. So we'll move on to, thank you, Councillor Harland. We'll move on to Councillor Rafiq's portfolio, please.
Thank you, Leader. This is a good news item. The paper provides the board with an update on the improvement work being undertaken and planned for delivery to improve the quality of council stock across the city, housing stock across the city. The council invests over 80 million annually to maintain and improve the quality of around 54,000 council homes. And this comprises a mixture of archetypes, including some high-rise, medium, low-rise flats, and some traditional brick-built housing, including semi-detached and back-to-back houses. This investment covers a range of essential activity, including energy efficiency, fire safety, health and safety, installation of adaptations, and routine life cycle replacements. Its investment is targeted based on the following criteria, which is addressing urgent health and safety issues and improving fire safety, replacing obsolete and outdated systems that are expensive to run and maintain, and improving homes in priority neighborhoods. The program includes several carbon reduction projects designed to improve fabric of housing through a variety of retrofit measures. I think the report is, Chair, quite self-explanatory. I'll stop there and happy to take any question and comments.
Thank you. Does anyone want to come in? Councillor Galton, please.
Thanks, Chair. I was expecting some supplementary information after my briefing, so I'm just wondering if I've missed it. One was to do with an estate in Boggart Hill, where there was 160 system-built Livet Cartwright properties that were going to get some significant insulation investment in at a cost of around £4 million. That was in the forward plan of key decisions, but it wasn't incorporated in this report, which was an omission really, because it's obviously you want to celebrate success, don't you? And there was another one, which was a question around, there's some really significant and ambitious investment plans for high rises in this paper, using things like ground source heat pumps, which is really commendable. And there's such a lot being done. But I asked the question specifically around people who might have bought their homes and what they would be subjected to in terms of charges for such improvements, or whether they would get them for free. Thank you.
Gerard, please.
Thanks. I'll pick up the leaseholder comment, and then Naheem can pick up the other issue about the estate that you referred to. There is some work that we do for leaseholders that we don't actually charge for councillors, focusing more on the health and safety side of the block. So sprinklers, for example, we wouldn't necessarily charge leaseholders for installing those in high-rise blocks, but there is other charges for other pieces of work that we do in there that we do have to charge them for. I know you asked for a breakdown of those costs. We haven't been able to get them for today, but that's something that we're working on, and we will be able to share with you shortly. But there is a number of options for leaseholders as well, where they are faced with a charge for work in the properties. We can create payment plans for them. We could potentially put a charge on the property. We'll obviously help them and not necessarily expect leaseholders to pay that bill in one go. I don't know if that answers the question, Councillor, on leaseholders.
So can I clarify, you haven't actually contacted any of them that would be in these high rises that are mentioned in the paper?
There's details in the report that's been shared highlighting what a number of the residents felt about the work that we've done, which was extremely positive in terms of the actual financial savings that they've achieved through the retrofit work that we've done. We haven't had a chance to actually sit down with them, work that out in terms of a pounds and pence figure yet. We did make reference to the fact that while we're confident that a lot of the work that we've done will reduce energy costs for people, we have to focus on the fact that energy prices are still rising, as we've all heard earlier. So those customers are still likely to pay more, but had we not done this work, they would potentially pay even more.
Thank you, Gerard. Are there any more questions or comments on this paper?
So the paper is
Yes, I'm happy to take that one. The scheme that you referred to, Councillor Galton, wasn't included in the paper. It wasn't an omission, it was deliberate, and that was because it was still being scoped, and it felt we were still working with BAYS in order to make sure that the properties we were putting forward were compliant with the criteria. And so we now have more details on that, and a full report will be produced for sign-off, but not here for executive board, but as part of the authority to spend and procure.
Great, thank you. Any more questions or comments? I take it, I turn to the recommendations on page 153. I take it everybody's happy with those. That's great. We'll move on to Councillor Pride's portfolio in item 11, please.
Thank you, Leader. So my first report is the outcome of the consultation on a proposal to decommission the resource provision at Glendale Primary School. So the NHS Speech and Language Therapy Service now allows children to access direct support while being on their roll in their mainstream school rather than travelling across the city. This has led to a reduction in the demand for specialist places at Glendale. There were 18 survey responses and the majority supported the proposal. Happy to take any questions.
Don't see any questions. Thank you. I will turn then to the recommendations on page 175, and I take it everybody's happy with those. So if we could move on to item 12, please.
Thank you. So this is the Future Talent Leeds report. The report outlines the work that's been undertaken to develop a new talent plan for Leeds and details the joint action plan and delivery approach. It references the impact of COVID on the local labour market. It's probably worth noting that there were just shy of 11,000 workers still on furlough in Leeds when the government's coronavirus job retention scheme came to an end. Job vacancies in the UK reached record highs last autumn, meaning that while mass employment isn't considered unlikely, there are still approximately 500,000 fewer jobs than before the pandemic. Job postings tend to relate to lower paid rather than mid to high paid jobs. Employment gaps are growing and remaining wide for disabled people, ethnic minorities, people over the age of 50, and young people outside of education, all of this adding to the cost of living crisis that we're all very aware of. Across the country, there are about 1.1 million fewer people in the labour force than we would have expected based on pre-COVID trends, with inactivity being driven by higher worklessness due to ill health, young people outside of full-time education, and by older people choosing to leave the labour market. COVID has accelerated a lot of underlying trends in the economy. For example, the adoption of digital technology and the need for digital skills, leaving people without those digital skills being locked out of the labour market at quite a rapid rate. So the Council's existing talents and skills plan was last published in 2017. So given the fundamental shift in both the national policy landscape and the local labour market, a refresh was needed. So that's why this report is coming forward. This paper gives detailed reasons behind the development of the new plan, including the impact of both COVID, as I've detailed, but also Brexit and the recognition of new trends in the economy. The report also notes the need to identify and maximise employment and skills opportunities relating to climate change, the West Yorkshire devolution deal, and changes to national skills and training policy. The report also details how the plan dovetails with the work that the Council is already undertaking around the Great Jobs agenda. I shall leave it there.
Thank you. Councillor Carter, please.
It's hard to argue with the sense of the report, but given that much of the plan is really going to be delivered by partners working with us, particularly regarding inclusive employment, what criteria are we going to use? It's another of these papers where you read it and it's difficult to disagree with it. But then you say, how on earth are we going to tell if we've actually achieved what we set out in the first paper we received? And I would like some clarity on what it is. How are we going to tell if we have been successful? Councillor Pryor.
delighted here to you're struggling to disagree with the paper. I think there are a number of measures. I've only just started. I mean, there are a number of measures. It's whether people are in better jobs, if they're in jobs where they have career paths ahead of them, if people are in jobs where they are actually using the skills they've trained to do rather than be in lower wage jobs. That there's a huge number of measures.
Why aren't they set out in this thing?
For the entire economy.
Councillor Galton, you're going to be more optimistic.
Well, I think the thing is, I think everyone wants this to succeed because they want as many people as possible in the city to have good jobs, which they can enjoy. I think that the issue is, how does the council, as the convener, measure that its efforts are having an effect? Or is it just the council collecting a load of data where it's windfall benefits that have happened because of the efforts of somebody else? And the only reason that question needs to be asked is because we all want to make sure that we invest even more in the stuff that really works. And in terms of the future talent, it's very interesting in terms of looking at our young people as they're growing up in our more deprived areas to enable them to have the opportunities that other kids in richer areas have in terms of accessing good jobs in things like digital. And we should ride the wave of the fact that we have lots of really good digital firms in Leeds and enable them to do even more and be the enablers to strike up those relationships with poorer neighbourhoods. But there's also issues around green jobs, and that's yet to be curated as part of this process. And I think there also needs to be another emphasis as well on people my age, where in the old days, you used to have one career, didn't you? And it lasted you your entire lifetime. But now the economy is developing at such a pace that you need to make sure that you're ready for different careers as time goes by. So it isn't just about catching them when they're young, like digital Jesuits. It's about also making sure that you can reprogram them when they're a little bit older as well, and make sure we're focusing on that. And I think that would be really useful to see as part of our future talent, because some of our future talent is current talent.
Eve, would you like to come in, please?
Thanks, Chair. So just a couple of comments. So, of course, all of the programmes that are delivered for our employment and skills service have measured outcomes in terms of participation, and we track onward destinations, people that go through some of those services. Events like the apprenticeship fair will always have outcomes that we can describe in terms of attendance, employers, engagement and breadth. So we do measure carefully our own services. Where we sponsor others on programmes, like where we might work with the AHEAD partnership, where we always make part of the terms of giving them a grant that we get outcome measurements from anything that they do. So where there's council money being spent, or where we're spending money that we have acquired through grants and other routes, we always make sure we're measuring those outcomes clearly. We're also, of course, at a sort of broader level, working towards adopting the Social Progress Index, which we had a really deep discussion with scrutiny about recently, and are working with ward members at the moment to test that out. So that will also help us measure our progress. As part of the work we did, we also had a session with Open Innovations, which used to be called ODI Leeds, around labour market data. There is a whole range of data we can get through DWP around unemployment and so on. The numbers, of course, were published this week. But we would like to do more to try and understand how the labour market is developing and help us to anticipate some of that and how things are changing. We'll continue that work with them and with Leeds University as part of this. And then just commenting on the digital work, it is, of course, not just about graduate talent and young people. There are some private sector operators in the city who've responded to the huge demand for digital skills, like North Coders, who moved across from Manchester. They cannot run enough courses at the moment to get people through and into the digital sector, and they take people who have had a previous career or in a different sector and support them through a 12-week boot camp into employers in the city. So there are some private sector and responses already in the city, and we're working with them increasingly as well to broaden some of that out. So absolutely, Councillor Galton, we're not just about the young people into digital. And in fact, if we did just focus on young people, we wouldn't be able to satisfy the demand. We know that there are literally thousands of jobs in the pipeline in Leeds in the digital sector, and we need to make sure that people that live in Leeds get access to those jobs. So I hope that kind of gives you a bit of a flavour for some of the detail.
Thank you, Eve. It's great, thanks. Are there any more comments? I don't see any, so I'm going to turn to the recommendations. To adopt the future talent plan and give them the warm welcome it's had, see if everybody's happy with the proposal. And I take it everybody is. So we're on to the last paper, please, Councillor Pryor.
Thank you. So this is the Leeds Museums and Galleries Strategy 2022 to 27. The strategy is built on 6 key outcomes with 6 objectives per outcome, all of which detailed in the report. The paper explains that the service manages 9 sites throughout Leeds, housing a collection of 1.3 million objects, making it the largest local authority run collection outside of London, and details the £24 million per year it brings to the local economy. So pre-COVID, the 9 venues welcomed over 1.7 million visitors a year and over 49,000 school children, and the websites attract over 3.5 million page views per annum. The strategy focuses on how we best use these sites, how to widen the impact of service across all Leeds' communities, as well as how we reach out regionally and nationally. The strategy will ensure that LMG is well placed to retain its national portfolio organisation status from Arts Council England, which brings in 1.6 million a year when we reapply next month. We also continue to explore opportunities to generate funds through enterprises such as shops, cafes, commercial events, as well as looking at fundraising potential of the service in the future.
Any comments?
Yes.
Councillor Carter, please.
I welcome this report. It's the first and the last report on this agenda of both enabled us to read them, understand them, know what we're doing, know how we're going to quantify if we're successful, unlike the rest of the reports, which anyway, yes. So I absolutely welcome it. Tick the right boxes, or Mr. Hopes has, and we can see if it actually works, which is what we need to see. So yes, I welcome it, as I said. So the first report and the last report, as regards the middle, get your act together.
Councillor Galton?
Happy to support, Chair.
It's great, thank you. I will turn to the recommendations on page 208. Maybe we should frame these and hang them in the gallery, given the recommendation we've had from Councillor Carter. Is everybody happy with those recommendations? That's great. Thank you, everybody. And we'll bring the meeting to a close.